Hello there. My name is Andy Conduit-Turner, and welcome to the Horror Hangout, where the film fans watch the best, the worst, and increasingly brand new horror movies coming to you. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Raven Carter, the writer and director of Noseeums, which was one of the films we saw at FrightFest this year. Raven, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. It's a beautiful time. I'm so excited for the film. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, just thank you for having me.
Well, we sadly didn't get to catch up with you live in London. A hectic schedule. Did you make it over yourself over to the UK? You
I
did.
did. Yeah, that was my first time in London. London is great. The subway is much nicer than New York. That's something I noticed. But I had a great time. I had gelato every night. I watched my movie a couple times because it showed twice.
Yeah, you had
Um,
double screenings, right? They sold out one of them at least.
yes, they were both, I think they both sold out. The first one sold out like at the very end, but the second one was sold out pretty early. And I just had a great time. I was there for about 3 days, first time in London. The jet lag was very intense, but I would definitely go back. It was just, the experience was incredible, and I'll never forget that.
And so remind me, so No CMs, obviously it was the UK premiere. Had it shown anywhere else in the world beforehand?
No, that was the world
The
premiere.
world premiere. I mean,
Yeah, Fright Fest was the world premiere, and Mill Valley Film Festival will be the US premiere, and
and
that'll be
when is that?
this coming weekend.
Wow, so this week, so we will need to hurry up and get this episode out quickly. Sorry, Ben, to get this one out. So hopefully people can still at the time of listening to this, if they listen to it as soon as it comes out, get
Yeah.
themselves over to catch its US premiere. Before we go into more about the film itself, let's take a step back and talk a little bit about you, if we may. So, Noseeums is your directorial feature debut. Um, where did filmmaking bite you, and is the horror genre always what you thought you'd be working in?
Yeah, the directorial debut, I feel like it's such it's like a bunch of big words, and when I think about it, I'm like, oh, I just made a movie with my friends, you know? Um, I would say filmmaking, I was not one of those people who was like 6 years old and was like, oh, I've always, had a camera on my hip since I was a little girl. One thing I knew I loved since I was a little girl was performance. And so I used to fall in love with plays, and movies and performances. And I took talent shows like really serious, even though my performance was always terrible. And I would get my friends together and I would make everybody do something that we were like super uncomfortable with, just because that was like the filmmaker in me, the creator in me, the producer in me. So I would say from a young age, performance was big for me and putting on like productions. And I cared a lot about moving a crowd or moving an audience at a very young age. And then as I developed into a teenager and young adult, sports were a big thing for me and my family. And then when I got to college, that's when I reconnected more with like these creative, um, just some of that creative soul that I had. So I started just researching things on Facebook that I could be a part of in the Austin area. I was attending Houston Tillotson University, in Austin, Texas, which is an HBCU. And I ended up getting an internship with Austin Film Society under Richard Linklater. And that was probably my first film type of opportunity. And doing that, was standard like checking the mail, answering some phone calls. I got super busy. COVID happened and ended up not really finishing, but that was definitely the launch pad into going to film school, going to Florida State University, and then getting selected to do the first feature for Torchlight Studios. I still can't believe it sometimes because I didn't even grow up, watching the Oscars and things like that. But it's just so amazing seeing how my life um, is turning out and how it changed. And yeah, I didn't expect any of this, but I feel extremely blessed and excited.
It's so interesting to hear the different paths and the different journeys. Because you're right, we hear from particularly in independent cinema. Because sometimes people who have been this pathway in this career has been mapped out for them. It's what they've studied, it's what they've always wanted to do, and they've had their time on
Yep.
commercials, on music videos, or whatever, and then got into film and then been given bigger and bigger chances. But when you see people that are working in like independent films as well, there's always such a passion for it. And you get the people who are like those kids who always had a camera and they were shooting something, to people who have like a passionate story they want to tell, or in your case, the talent shows and the live performances that has taken along, that life of telling stories. So we're obviously doing a podcast called The Horror Hangout here. I would be foolish of me not to ask a little bit about your history with horror and horror stories. Like, what are your earliest memories of like horror in your entertainment? Was it books? Was it movies? Where was it?
Yeah, my earliest memories of horror was definitely just watching things with my parents and family. Oh gosh, Jeepers Creepers. So many yeah, so many classics like Saw. I think Saw is like one of my dad's favorite movies. Halloween, Children of the Corn. Yeah, especially Jeepers Creepers. I think Jeepers Creepers was my favorite growing up, and I would say watching horror movies was something that everyone in my family really liked. Like that was something we could get together and do, with all the different personalities. Mom likes her thing, dad likes his thing. My brother, likes his thing, but you put on a horror movie and I noticed that was like the one thing that could like bring us all together. So I would say watching horror movies with my family was always just a rush and it was so fun. And then from there, I fell in love with like social horror films, especially, Get Out. And Jordan Peele is, of course, one of my favorite directors, and I like a lot of his work. Yeah, and so when I got the opportunity to make a horror, I knew that was the path, and I would say the short films that I made leading up to Noseeums were definitely in like that horror element or like, something's off, something is strange. Um, yeah, I have like some sci-fi and drama elements in one of my first shorts that got me featured on Movie Maker magazine. And yeah, I love stories with like this audacity to just say something really powerful. And I think, horror is so fun. You can do so much with it. I think it's ever changing. I wouldn't say I only want to make horror movies forever, but it's seeming like I guess this is my early career and like the early stuff is definitely in the horror realm. So I'm totally fine with that.
Thing is, there's so many ways you can branch off. Like you've mentioned, you could go horror into sci-fi. I've seen people go horror into comedy. I've seen people go into the drama and the relationship side of things. Getting ready for Fright Fest, in fact, there's been a couple of people that we met that have a mixed discipline in doing horror movies and then your Christmas Hallmark movies as well. We met with director and star of Five that was exactly that. They literally have a background in doing your sweet romances around the holidays, and then
Yeah,
they turn their hand to a horror as well. So there's a lot of variety out there for you,
yeah.
for
Okay, nice.
sure. Um, so let's dive in. Actually, before we talk about Noseeums the film, we're going to do a little bit of cultural exchange, if you don't mind, because when I first saw the name of the film written down, I take it like in the US, no-see-ums do people know what they are? I had to go away and research what a no-see-um was.
Yeah. I think it's more of a Florida thing. I did not know what they were until I moved to Florida. So the original name, I believe, is Biting Midges. And
Mhm.
that was the original title of the film, Biting Midges. And I thought that was a fun name too, and I fell in love with that. And then over time, when Torchlight and some of our team realized after doing some research that another name for a biting midge was a no that's when we did that switch over because it was such an attractional name, and it sounds scary, like, there's something that you cannot see, so we lean into it. But a biting midge is just a tiny little fly. I kind of think of it as like a mosquito but smaller, and just a lot more harsh because you can't see it, and so you're getting bit up and you're itching and you have all these, you're covered in these bumps, but you don't know where to spray, you don't know what to swat at, you don't know what to
They're
kill.
impossible to get right because again, talking to someone who lives in Scotland now, we just have the midges here, and they are the exact same bugs. They just go by just midges. And
Okay,
if you're ever out in the countryside where they live, Scotland is famous for it because we have quite wet and cold weather throughout the most of the year, apart from the summer months, which is when
okay,
the midges come out. And then I'm not sure if the ones in Florida are similar, but what they do is they will get like in your hairline and things like that, where you can do nothing about it because, like, you could wear long sleeves, you could wear long trousers and what have you, but they are impossible to avoid. People go out if they're out like walking in the countryside or they have a reason to be outside because they're working or something, people go out in like beekeeper suits to try and keep them away. Um,
yeah,
and I think it's wonderful that you chose the name that really goes into kind of like a colloquial name that people use locally in that region. Because for me, reading the thing, reading the title, it did give me that intrigue to like, oh, what is this? Is it about like the horror element? Is this like a creature or like a spiritual, like ghost element that I'm going to find here? And
right.
the way that it really plays into the film as it progresses was super interesting. But while we're here, let me give everyone who's listening who maybe hasn't heard of Noseeums the the synopsis that we have here. So, uh, per the per the poster, like you can't see the Noseeums, but they see you. Fresh from a toxic relationship, a curious college student, Ember reluctantly agrees to a weekend trip with her roommate and wealthy white friends, in inverted commas, to a secluded lake house in the Florida backwoods. Once she arrives at the unsettling land, it becomes familiar as she unearths troubled spirits that owned it and seek to reclaim it. Um, there's your setup. There's your premise.
Yeah.
We'll dig into the deeper themes in a little while, but to begin with, a lovely classic horror setup, right? There is a mixed group of friends. Those personalities don't necessarily, not everyone's going to be getting on this trip, and they're taking their trip out to an isolated location where they're going to hang out and hopefully have a lot of fun. But of course, we wouldn't be in for horror movies if everything was going to go to plan. Is that like a setup that you were super familiar with that you wanted to lean into? What, like, any other ideas that you had to bring these people to this secluded location?
Yeah, so the original story idea came from a good friend of mine named Jason Michael Anthony, and him, myself, and our friend Hendrik wrote it. And gosh, I know that, like screenplays generally do, there's been so many different drafts. Early on, we hadn't even thought about having these bugs manifest. Like, we didn't even think about that much. We were like, this is going to be a ghost story. This is going to be, we were leading into this ghost idea, and the midges, they're so annoying, they're pesky. They're actually a reason why some Floridians in the past, I don't know about now, but they would vacate areas because they were that bad.
Hmm.
And so we liked the idea of juxtaposing these biting midges with Black people, and how Black people would move into a neighborhood and white people would vacate that neighborhood because they didn't want to be associated, with this other race. And so this became a story about that. Um, yeah, and I would say them going to, the secluded area, and I wasn't thinking a whole lot about other films that do that, but I know that's a very common thing. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I love the films that have done it. I think it's a great, I think it was a good method or whatever for our first feature.
Yeah. Classic horror setup. You have to love these things. But yeah, let's look at the deeper things you mentioned about like the social comments that come in here as well. I know you've done a great deal of research and discussion on this as well, but there is a great undertow to this story that really confronts some real problems with history, right? Where black families had their land stolen from them when they should have been rightly inherited by their children, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what's the, where did where did that story, where did that come to you, and what gave you the passion that you wanted to share this story as part of this film? Because obviously it's something which is, I think, fair to say. I mean, I'm talking from another country where we have limited American history anyway, but is it something that you say is underrepresented and not really taught in schools, and you wanted to bring it to light?
Yeah, I think that there are so many things that, that the film spark up for me. Um, a big thing is like lineage history for Black people in general, like especially African Americans. We can only go so far back. We can only go, once we get past our grandparents and our great grandparents, it's really hard to find, okay, who was before that? Who was before that? Where do I come from? Who am I? And it's kind of easy to ignore when you're a child. And then when you get older, like the age of Ember, on that college level, and you're starting to take all of these different courses and you're learning about things like philosophy and ethics and African American history and history in general. And I feel like college really like took the veil off for me going since I attended a historically Black university. So I went from this like predominantly white high school in a small town in Texas. And then I jumped over to this historically Black college. And now I'm learning all of these things about my history. And it's this really uncomfortable place where you feel super disconnected from who you are, but also um, deeply connected in other ways because you're at this institution with all of these other Black students. Um, but yeah, I think it just goes back to lineage, and it is a story that needs to be talked about more. And it's happening today. Like even in news today, there are people who are just, getting their land back. Um, yeah. Heir's property is spoken about in the film, so I guess I won't give too much. But if anyone watching looks up Heir's property, it is it is so interesting, and it happens frequently. Um, yeah, and then before Black people, there were Native Americans, so we could go even further, right?
Mhm.
But it was just a really fun topic to explore, and I would say that writing this we as Black writers, myself and the other two writers are Black and I guess a little older than Ember as we're writing this. We were, looking in the mirror and thinking a lot about our background and things like that. And we were sending each other like news articles of like, this happening in real time. And that was pretty mind blowing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, like not only from a historical context here, but as you say, something which is very much the experience of people today that are finding out more about their past and their own family history as well, and obviously tremendously difficult because of the nature of where people were taken from their homes and moved across the world with no records and so on. So, yeah, a tremendously interesting story, and I don't want to dive into it too much because I don't want to spoil the film, which and obviously it's so tied into that story there. But for me, one of the most surprising elements of the film to go in there, I think, particularly when you're at a genre festival, and I don't want to diminish horror's capacity to have serious discussions and to reflect on important things in society, both historical and modern. In fact, horror is one of the best lenses we have as
Mhm.
creators, I think, to share some of those stories, whether it is shining light on history or potentially flagging up the ills of past or current society because you're meant to be in a confrontational space in a horror film.
Right.
But it is very surprising when you go to a genre film festival where there is going to be an awful lot of things. There are going to be things which are, hey, this is purely a piece of entertainment. Don't think about this too deeply. And when there are, what, 60 movies or whatever playing, you can't necessarily, even if it's your job to talk about them, know everything that's coming in. And for me, Noseeums was a great surprise to think, hey, am I going to see like a cabin in the woods type story
Right.
where there's going to be, once I'd looked up what Noseeums are, okay, so it's going to be like these bugs that are going to be, is it going to be like a creature feature that I'm
Right.
going to see here? But actually so much more depth into the background and the history that, you know, applause for you. Like the you take time to explore it. It's not just a line and then you say, "Oh, and also it's this." Like you do take the time to go in there and it's tied into the relationships, the growing antagonism between the relationship between Ember and her not real friend, the girl that at least claims ownership of this property from her family type of view as well. And I did not focus, you do have some conversations with them. The beginning as awkward and misplaced, and then like you really drive like some of the casual racism and the privilege that comes across, and they're almost feeling offended for being for being pointed out that this girl has a privileged position, and she's like, "How dare you say that I'm privileged?" Um,
Right.
like, where was how did you and the team go about like writing and representing that? Because I'm guessing that's quite a difficult one to know how to tone exactly right to run through the film, right? Was that a real challenge to write?
Yeah, I think with scenes like that, when there's like just a conversation being had and you want to increase the tension as much as possible, or you want to communicate something with like depth, I just took the approach of, how can I write this conversation or this debate to where each person seems right.
Hmm.
There almost is no wrong person. I think both of them have very valid points, even if, even if the delivery is what pisses the audience
Hmm.
off. If you listen to the words that Abigail is saying, some of it is actually, persuasive or, in my opinion, somewhat correct. Or if not correct, again, I grew up in the South. Like I grew up in a small town in Texas. I grew up around a lot of people who don't look like me, and I have come to know, certain things that they say and ways that they think. And when I was younger, I didn't completely understand and know that it was wrong, at least to my history, right? So I think I'm also able to pull from what I've heard, frequently. And that was my goal, was just to, how can we write this to make sure that Abigail is representative, is like properly representing a group of people who are super controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing that you say, like then like putting it together to make no one truly right or truly wrong, because I guess you can see those things, aren't you? That it is true when Abigail says that, but I haven't done anything bad. And like you look at how people react to any kind of threat, regardless of what you recognize from history. I understand it probably does feel very challenging if someone says, "Hey, these things that you have don't really belong to you." And I guess it is a natural reaction to, well, I didn't do anything. Like, why should, yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic and I think really nicely explored in this film. And, we're talking about some of the heavier themes of the film, but you do get to have quite a lot of fun as well, right? You get some comedy in there, you get quite a lot of lightness, both physically and in in the delivery of some lines as well. So did you deliberately approach that you wanted like, hey, we've got some heavy topics here as well. Let's inject some humor into this too.
Yeah, I think that I just really wanted to at least have a couple scenes that felt like girls just being girls. Turn the music on, let's dance, let's twerk, let's rock out, let's smoke, let's drink. Like, I just wanted to have a few scenes where it was just girls being girls. Because that's I want people to be in the world. Not everything had to be so heavy. Because it is, I mean, it's a heavier topic, I guess, to some people. And so those scenes were a lot of fun to direct, where it's just friends being friends. It's just girls being girls. Even if girls aren't besties, like even if they're not like really close in friendship, they can still, smoke a joint together. And I think we've all seen that, where you don't really talk to this person during the day, or you don't really vibe with them at school, but at the party, you guys are everyone's kind of doing the same thing, and you're in a different circle. So, yeah, that's really where that came from. Just the feeling of wanting to put people in a world of girls just having fun and being girls. Yeah.
And it is for the age the characters are as well, like a wonderful transitional time where I'm not saying that you're completely removed from cliques and stuff by the time you get to college, but it is very different from your high school experience where everyone goes off to that next step of their life, college, university, or what have you. And then those groups and everything are all of a sudden quite mixed up, especially in a country as large as the US, I imagine, where actually the things you have in common with people when you move away from the town you grew up in, all of a sudden you might be defined by, well, actually, hey, I'm in a completely different group. Um, any kind of baggage that I've brought or people what recognize me, this is what I was in high school, there is now a big grand reset, and maybe you meet people based on completely neutral merits that you have things in common, or hey, we're from a similar state or a similar part of the country, so we have that in common as well. So really resetting those relationships, and that is where you get those wonderful moments like you have at there. Everyone gets to just chill out and hang out for a little bit as well, not intense all the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Raven, where is next for you? So the feature is out. We have your US premiere at the time of recording this very weekend. Where else can people see this coming up? Do we Are we looking at distribution? You got more festivals in your future? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so after Mill Valley, we're headed to Atlanta for, I believe, the Atlanta film series. And then after Atlanta, we're headed to Santa Fe. We'll be showing Noseeums at Santa Fe. And then from there, there is some buzz about some really good things happening. So I hope to keep everyone updated, and I'm excited. And it's just a beautiful time for me, for the team. We worked extremely hard. It was tiring shooting overnight. Um, being young, it's our first feature, and just trying to make the best movie that we can. So I'm just super appreciative of everyone who's come up to me and expressed any type of appreciation and adoration for the movie. Like, that's what keeps filmmakers going. So yeah, I'm excited, and I thank you as well, Andy, for having me.
Well, no, thank you for joining us. And obviously, there are a few things I think better as a reward as a filmmaker, right? A double well-attended screening in London for an international premiere. You can take that with you for a good number of years, and hopefully we'll see distribution rights, so people who can't make it to any of these festivals can hopefully catch it somewhere else in the near future. You say you're going to keep people updated on that. We all know, thanks to certain people, social media is not what it used to be. Where is the best place to follow you and keep up on the news?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, and I post a lot about the film there. So you can follow me at Purpose Driven Raven, and that's no spaces, at Purpose Driven Raven on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, that is the place to be then. People can keep up with there and find out where they can see Noseeums. If this is something that we've teased them enough for and they're interested in catching up with it, then you'll keep them up to date there. I couldn't let you go off on the horror hangout here without giving you the toughest question of all, of course. Anyone who gets unlucky enough to be interviewed by me instead of Ben gets this one. So I'm going to put you in under some pressure now because it is spooky season. It's Halloween. You're young. You like to have a party. I know this from talking to you for the last 30 minutes or so. So Halloween night is coming. Everyone is coming round to your place for a horror movie night. You're a
Mm.
filmmaker now. You've had a debut feature out. So they're turning to you to choose the movie that you're putting
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
What are you putting on? I'm going to say a mixed crowd, not all big horror fans.
yeah.
It's like your family dynamic. People with all kinds of tastes coming in there. You got one movie. What are you putting on for them?
I'm putting on Coraline.
Coraline. Okay. Okay.
Love Coraline. I think Coraline definitely has the ability to unite horror fans and non-horror fans. So yeah.
See, this is my favorite question to ask because honestly, I don't think I've ever had the same answer twice. This is so cool. Like, yeah, one of these days I'm going to put a playlist together with all the films that people have recommended, and we'll do like our
Yeah.
own film festival. The rights will
Yeah.
cost me a fortune, but that. But
Good
yeah,
question.
another one for the list. Good choice. Well, all that's left for me to say, most importantly, thank you, Raven, for jumping on the call with me and catching up when you could be starting your evening over there. So you can go and get yourself some dinner and relax after a hard day at work. Thank you to everyone who has listened. Follow Raven, get some more news from Noseeums. I will see you all next time for another bit of Horror Hangout. Goodbye for now, everybody.